My name is Amber Stoltz, and I serve as the Black Professionals Network Programming and Development Chair. For this year, my term is ending this month, so very excited to have the last session and have a great year with you all thus far. Today's topic is the job search process. So we have Denacha Thompson with TPE, that's the director. She will be able to give us some great materials and great insight today for all of you at various points, whether you're looking or you're just here to get information on future looks and preparation. So I'll go ahead and let you get into the presentation today. Thank you for joining us.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everybody. This is my awkward 5 seconds just to check in to make sure you can see and hear me clearly. Perfect. As Amber said, thank you for the warm introduction. I am Denaja Pendergrass Thomas. I currently serve as the director of the Placement Exchange. I've only been in this role for a year and a month, so I'm very new in it, but I am not new to this work. My background is in housing and residence life. Did about 12 years in the field between time at 2 institutions, at Duke University in Durham, North Carolina, and Wake Forest University in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. I am now a full remote worker with TPE. I'll talk a little bit about what that role looks like before we get started. My pronouns are she and her. And what I have planned for us today is guided by some slides, but it really is intended to be a conversation. And so I will screen share just for folk who are visual learners so that you have that benefit, but I have it set up so that I can see you all and you can see me. So I encourage you to camera on as you feel comfortable. If you have questions, throw them in the chat or throw a hand raise up. I will do my best to try to catch them in the moment, but you definitely don't have to hold them to the end. I think for this topic, it is not one that will be enjoyable or worthwhile for you to be lectured to, but will be more beneficial if we're able to engage in conversation and dialogue. And so I'm going to go ahead and share this screen with you. And then we'll jump in. So just out of curiosity, to get us going, how many of you have engaged in a job search in the past 3 years? You can just throw your hand up or, all right. Good deal. So that's a good bit of people who have had to navigate looking for a job in the virtual world. It has been since 2019 that TPE was in person in LA. And since then, we have all been on campuses navigating what it means to try to get a job in a virtual space. The topic that I wanted to theme for today, because in conversation with Amber, she was like, can you speak to grad students looking for a job, early career professionals looking to move up, mid-level looking for that next job, people who are thinking about stepping outside of student affairs or housing for a while. And what we realized is that in 60 minutes, it's hard to talk about each individual search process. And so what I put together is a way to think about the job search holistically and provide some space for you to think about what it means for you, depending on where you are in your process. So here's my thesis. I just want you to consider for a moment that we don't just do student affairs work, or we don't just do housing and residence life work. I would like for you, although it's just kind of picking with semantics, to consider what it means to say that you are a practitioner instead of just saying that you do something. Because for me, to affirm that I am a practitioner means that I am someone who is skilled at the art and the science and the discipline of a particular thing. And so if I am a practitioner, that implies a certain level of investment and development and intentionality in the work that I do, versus I just come in and kind of function as a cog in a wheel. And so if I'm a practitioner, that means that everything that goes into the work that I do is a part of my professional development, such that the job search process, the way we recruit, look for jobs, retain our staff, and think about how we advance as professionals could and should actually be considered a practice of professional development, and not just something that we pick up and shelve every 3 to 5 years or when we're ready to look for our next job. So before we dive in, while you're thinking about that, for those of you who don't know, the Placement Exchange has been around for about 12 years or so. And our reputation is being known as an in-person placement event that typically happen. I see you, Kendall, congratulations, 4 months. a placement event that happened the week before NASPA. So that meant it traveled across the country wherever NASPA was. TPE is taken care of by two parent associations, NASPA and ACU Hawaii, but it functions autonomously in that we exist to serve the entire profession. So while those two organizations make sure the money is right and we have administrative things, we are not siloed to only serve people who are affiliated with either organization. So anyone who is looking for work or opportunity in student affairs, TPE exists for them. And then lastly, the staff is me and my colleague Spencer. So you'll hear us say we, but when we say we, I am 9 times out of 10 talking about an amazing committee that I will introduce you to in just a moment. This next slide, I wanted to have a moment to share because it's been a long time coming. Up until this year, TPE had a tagline. It was where you find your perfect job and where employers find their perfect candidate. Lofty, but an admirable goal that we met often, but everything around that was not very defined. We have decided to really stretch TPE to become a year-round service to the profession, much like the thesis I just gave you, right? Thinking about job searching as a part of your professional development cycle. If that is the case, then TPE should exist as a year-round service to the profession to help folks get a job whenever that time is right for you and to help employers find and hire candidates when that time is right for them. So I'm using opportunities that I can to make sure that people know a little bit more about the track that we're on. And so we do have guiding principles. I hope they will make sense throughout this presentation. They are innovative practice, cultivation of global knowledge and learning, advocacy and responsiveness, justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, accessibility, and belonging, and well-being of the individual and the profession. And then our mission, which I'm really excited about, is that we want to drive equitable and inclusive people-centered human resource practices. That's the whole scope. That's the materials, that's the mentoring, that's the interviewing, that's the onboarding, that's our efforts around retention and advancement. And we really want to do that in 3 ways. That's connection, learning, and still holding on to the third component that people really know us for, which is the placement opportunity. And again, our goal is to support the full career life cycle of the professional. Most people have said TPE is where they got their first job. Our goal is that TPE is where you find your graduate assistantship. It's where you come back and get your first job. It's where you find your mid-level job. It's where you find your director level and so on and so forth. We really want to expand and grow to help people along their full journey. And then lastly, the ultimate goal is to sustain the workforce, is to support the people that are spending time with me this afternoon to make sure that in the work that you are doing, you are fulfilled, that you are healthy and well, and that you're experiencing vibrancy in the work that you do. I can't do it without my committee. Like I said, I'm a team of 1.5 when Spencer can help me. And so I wanted to make sure that when you all engage with TPE and you attend webinars or participate in the placement experience, that you know that what you get comes from people who do it out of their passion and their love for this field through volunteerism. And we know the work that pays takes a lot of our time. And so I want to always acknowledge the people who are giving their extra time to support the work that we do. And so this year, TPE 23 is chaired by Dr. Tim Layson, who is at Northern Kentucky University, Caress Gillespie, who is at Syracuse University. And then our ambassador subcommittee are Dom Crosby and Robert Blackwell. Our candidate subcommittee are Ray Gordon, Courtney Ruff, and ICU Lab. Our employer support subcommittee are Abigail Smith, who's all the way over in the Middle East serving, and then Quincy Bumpkin, who's at Syracuse, and then our amazing people in Marcom who do our materials and social media, Connor Brady, Samantha, and Jill. So I have an amazing group of people who give a lot of time and energy to TPE, and I'm very grateful for their work. This is what we're talking about because it matters that we acknowledge, I'm glad you loved him, that we acknowledge the context that we're talking about looking for a job in, that we're talking about recruitment in. And so very frequently we have conversations in our committee meetings about what's the pulse on our field? What's the context that we're doing this work in? And so 2 things I want to highlight. We're talking a good bit about how to help people find better success with advancing in the field. There are lots of research and articles about our field being saturated at entry level or early career opportunities, and that gets a little tighter. A little more competitive, and the roles are very slim the higher up you go, and the impact that has on needing to be flexible with where you want to live and move across the state or across regions to get work. We're also talking a lot about the impact of supervision and professional development on hiring and recruiting and retention. When we talk about employee satisfaction and motivation for a lot of people looking for a new job, salary is there, but there's a lot of conversation around supervision or lack thereof and the impact that that's having on the employee experience. A few more things that we're talking about, what employers are looking for, which I always enjoy letting job candidates know about. Employers really are thinking about an earlier timeline for how they recruit and look for candidates. We recognize that holding off for once a year to hire candidates in March is just not congruent with when job seekers are looking for a job, and that timeline needs to move up and that the process needs to work a lot quicker. Employers are always talking about how to have better and heavier advertising and marketing to reach a more diverse pool of candidates. And then lastly, they're really talking about their expectation for TPE to go and find candidates for them. I appreciate that feedback. I sit in some tension with that feedback because I don't know where a secret bank of candidates are. But TPE is doing the best that we can to connect with folks who may be job seekers and help people understand that there's value add and benefit to being a part of student affairs. And then lastly, we are always talking about what an equitable and accessible staffing experience and job search process should look like. We are in a field where people and relationships are our currency and our capital. And so if we are not continuing to talk about the ways in which that impacts social justice, equity, diversity, and belonging, then our processes will continue to lag and be antiquated and keep us from meeting candidates that would be of benefit and of asset to our field. So now let's dive into it. That's a bit about TPE. If you have more questions, feel free to follow up with me later, but I really want to start to talk about this subject matter, job searching as professional development. So I want you to consider this very quickly. If it's professional development, then you've got to think about how the things that you're doing every day in your role are building up the portfolio that you have to make yourself a competitive candidate. And so for me, it's the same model that I use for our task force to think about TPE. There's got to be a foundation that guides who you are and what you're doing. And so that's your values. That's the vision that you have for yourself as a practitioner and a professional and the purpose that you find in doing in this work. And then you really have to have a mindset. And that's really what I would call your why. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. What ebbs and flows through the work that you do? For TPE, it really is going to be how are people centered, how we focus on well-being, and how we introduce innovation. For you as a practitioner on your campus and in your office, whether you're working with students or with your supervisor, it's important to start to think about what guides your mindset and your approach. People may say, well, it's student development. There's so many theories and models on student development. Which one or which ones? And how are you integrating those into the ways that you function in the work that you do to continue to build that out? So job searching then becomes the means by which you enter and advance in the field. And it's you doing this as a practitioner who is skilled at the art and discipline of your particular work. And so you are looking for an opportunity or a position that allows you to continue to cultivate that skill, build the competencies to make you a talented and qualified and competent practitioner. So we're going to talk about 3 areas with this idea of job searching as professional development. The first is that it's a process that requires awareness of self. The second is that it requires intentionality around exploration and around discovery. And then the last is that it requires the ability to communicate with clarity and with effectiveness. And I think this is the last piece where we'll spend a good bit of our time because it's around the communication that most people really want to dive in and just say, here are my materials. Can you edit them? Can you tweak them? Can you fix them? Can you teach me how to answer questions the right way to get the job? I think there's a lot more to interviewing than just picking up the tool. I think the tools are only valuable to you and are only beneficial after we've done the work of really doing the awareness and the discovery to put the full package together. So when we talk about clarity, you've heard me say I'm very much into semantics. I do think it matters that we're clear about what we're talking about. And so when you want to communicate with clarity, we're really talking about how you are able to be coherent and intelligible. It's cultivating the strategies that help you to hear a question, pull from your bank about your experiences, your values, and your identity, and create an answer to a question that can bring all of that together and synthesize it in such a way that it's intelligible, able to be processed by someone, and that it's coherent. The other side of that is effectiveness, which leans more to the emotive side. So it's not that just I heard what you said and it logically makes sense. The other piece of it is now that I find myself akin or liking to how you said it, and it makes me want to have an affinity to how and why you do what you do, such that I know you have the skill set and the way, the method, and the approach that you would apply that skill set is one that is appealing to me as an employer. So let's talk a little bit about awareness of self. And this is where I'm going to invite you to unmute if you would like, and we engage in just a bit of conversation. So the first part is around personal reflection. I'm a huge fan of critical reflection, and critical reflection for me is doing the things or practices that really do help us have a deeper meaning and understanding of who we are, what we're doing, and why we're doing things the way that we are, the impact that the role is having on us currently. So knowing who you are, the different facets of your complex identity, and the ways in which that shows up in the work that you do is worth reflecting about every now and then. When you've been in a semester of meetings and you recognize a pattern of frustration, or if you know that you're in a team or an office and you're talking about the climate and it's one that particularly makes you feel affirmed and you're like, this is the office where I know I belong, it's worthwhile to reflect to say, what is it about this space that makes me feel like I belong? So that when you start to interview and you ask questions, you're able to pinpoint those aspects and to find out if future offices are able to cultivate that for you in the same way. So it's your identity, it's being aware and having a deeper understanding of your values, not just what they are, but how you like to see them play out in the work that you do. I'm a big fan of StrengthsFinder. We just did a session to help candidates think through how to talk about their results from their StrengthsFinder, and it's a part of their interview process. And then some people are Enneagram. I went to Divinity School. They love Enneagram. You can use any sort of assessment tool if you would like, but the benefit of doing this critical reflection around your identity and your values and your strengths is really to think about what you need in a supervisor. What sort of culture would be healthy for you, would be conducive for you, and then what you need to know about a future employer when it comes to equity, inclusion, social justice, and belonging. Because people can give you their speech, they can roll out their spiel and tell you about their campus, but when you have a high level of self-awareness, you can start to listen for congruence, or where there may be a rub or a lack to ask, it's very important for me to have a supervisor who knows what it means to be an under 40 Black woman in this field. Have you ever supervised someone who holds marginalized or underrepresented identities? How do you utilize your capital as a supervisor to help your employees navigate spaces where this may be a challenge, right? There's something that comes from me being able to reflect about my experiences, know what I need, such that I can then engage with employers to have a better understanding of the environment that I may be coming into. Reflection around your role on a team. We always talk about people who we either love to sit beside at the team meeting, who just get it without us having to say a whole lot, or team members who we drag our feet and go, oh gosh, I gotta go in a meeting with so-and-so. It is worth taking the space to reflect upon, what is it that makes me feel this way? How do I engage with conflict and feedback on the teams that I'm on, right? When it comes to emotional intelligence, I do manage my emotions well, but what really sends me through the roof that makes me take a 30-minute walk after a meeting? How do I name that and process that and what it means for the role that I play on a team, the type of dynamics on a team that support or affirm me, rub me or excite me? And how do I channel that into knowing what I need to look for in a future job? And so those things tend to reflect what you should ask about supervision, culture, the nature of collaboration and communication at a future institution or organization. And then reflection around your own leadership identity. I think this is probably harder for our grad students who are entering our field because you haven't typically had an opportunity to be a positional leader. Unless you've had like a co-supervision opportunity, or you've had the opportunity to step up where there have been vacancies on your campus. This becomes more important and deeper in need of understanding as you progress to being a mid-level manager, director, and executive director. When people say, tell me about your leadership philosophy or your approach to leadership, one, you've got to have an awareness of the different types and models of leadership, right? There's hierarchical, positional, there's relational, there's servant leadership. There's so many models and types of leadership. It's worth reflecting on how you engage with others in your current role and doing some reading and understanding on models of leadership to see where you find yourself adjusting and flowing in the work that you have done. I'm a huge fan of leadership identity development. I think it affirms a lot of things about our field, whether or not we want to say it. We are a highly relational field. You can come in with a type of leadership identity and position, but if you've ever worked, right, we're all in housing and residence life. By the time you finish being a live-in staff person, the idea that you have to figure out how to lead in conjunction with 5, 6, 10, 12 other people becomes normed very quickly. And so in that, how are you mediating your own values, your own leader identity, and blending that? Because there's always the expectation for congruent student staff experience, right? But my peer across campus does not run their meetings or lead in the same way that I do. Staff meetings are typically conversations around congruent or similar experience for our student staff. How are you doing this? How are you doing that? Knowing your preference for leading and how that impacts your staff and the folk who co-lead with you is very beneficial, such that when you go in to a potential interview, you're asking questions about that organization's mission, vision, and values, their own mentorship and coaching that's provided, and if that will support and affirm the ways and models that you affirm for how you lead. The second one is exploration and discovery for your mindset. What's your why? I think asking yourself your why is a very valid question. I don't recommend Simon Sinek's TED Talk that everyone likes to make you watch. It's a little dry, it's a little snarky, but it is worth knowing what undergirds what you do, is what I mentioned earlier, particularly as you progress in this work. Because people will want you in an interview space. They'll say, tell me a little bit about you. They're not really wanting to know about your dogs and your hobbies. They're wanting to hear how you can weave together your professional journey. And so if your why can be the seam that keeps that together, it's impactful to come in and say, well, good afternoon. It's nice to talk to you. I'm a 12-year practitioner in this work. I started as a grad student while I was in divinity school, recognizing that it was important to live in community while I studied a degree that emphasized community, though in a religious setting. I continued in a position to be a live-in coordinator because I realized that there was deep value in continuing to cultivate relationship coaching and mentorship with student staff. I had a supervisor that encouraged me to make notes of the things that excited me and were passions for me and what she called a file cabinet, such that when I had enough ideas that I knew I couldn't implement where I was, it might be a good time to look for a next position. I realized that I love supervision, I love cultivation, and I love mentorship. So I looked for an opportunity to be an assistant director. I chose another school that had a live-on requirement because I believe that if you were going to follow community building and engagement for students, you needed to be able to follow them for longer than 1 year. So I wanted to continue to stay on a residential campus. Throughout all of this, what has become clear for me is that I have deep value in relationships, cultivating those relationships, following students along a journey of growth and maturation through community, right? So I've talked about different jobs that I've had, but the underlying theme is this commitment and passion to relationship building, mentorship, coaching, and development. For some people, it's going to be curriculum. For some folks, it's going to be working with faculty and thinking about how to bridge the gap between the academic and the residential space. But it's through reflection and looking at why you do what you do, how you do it, and the little things that continue to pick up in the small tasks that may help you identify why you're doing what you're doing. Then we can talk about skill set, right? We can talk about all the things we do, and the list is long in housing and residence life. But when you look at a resume, and everyone will use a mid-level manager opportunity, when everyone has been a live-in coordinator, what is it about your experience as a live-in coordinator that separates you from every other candidate that has supervised RAs, sat on a training committee, opened and closed, collaborated on office projects? It's the skills that you have chosen to cultivate while you've been doing that work. So is it critical thinking? I know that I want to lead one day, and it's going to be strategic planning. So I've done the same thing as my colleague, Deanna, My focus has really been to get into the weeds and figure out how to improve my critical thinking. So while doing this, I've really engaged in learning the logistics with my counterpart in housing so I could see how the system impacts what we ask RAs to do, which impacts how we put together our training program for opening and closing, right? It's a very blanket example, but it's how you take the skills and really fold them into how you've been able to pull that out of the task. So it's not just what you do, it's what you've learned from it. And so for our field, I asked some peers who are at a director level what skills they would think are very pertinent, particularly if you're thinking about moving up. And they came to critical thinking, leadership, which we've talked about. And sometimes we think if we're not going to be a director, that the leadership conversation doesn't really matter. But interpersonal skills, the ability to coach and develop others, can happen at any level. It could be peer-led, it could be gained from working with student staff, it could be gained from advising, but any way that you can show you've cultivated this skill set to develop others, motivate others, help people work towards achieving a goal, you can show that you can prioritize and delegate tasks. That's the ability to generate buy-in. That's leading at a relational level. Initiative. How do you proactively handle situations and find answers without someone telling you how to do it? Sometimes that starts really small. It's learning a lesson, and then the next time you take a stab at it, and then you go to your supervisor and your one-on-one and say, this one didn't require you to intervene. Here's how I thought it through. This is what I did, and this is where we are. And then give the opportunity for your supervisor to give you feedback or just have some conversation around, this is how it felt to try it. I was a little nervous in this area, but I think it was good for me to try it. Would you have recommendations for how I could have done things differently? Work with your supervisor on opportunities to take initiative in small ways, or know the nature of the autonomy that you have in your role to take initiative, test things out. But then that last piece is to share it with a mentor, a coach, or a supervisor and invite them to give you feedback on how that process went. And then, of course, teamwork. My basis for teamwork is mutuality and respect. Everyone has their minimum threshold. Likability is not on my list. My expectation for working on a team is mutuality and respect. Can we agree that everyone brings value? Can we trust that people can do what's necessary in their lane and I stay in mine? And can we engage in ways that are respectful of who we are and what we do? You have to figure out what teamwork is for you, but once you do, own that, get comfortable with talking about that, and get comfortable asking the future employer around what their understanding and expectation is for being a member of a team. And then attention to detail. When we talk about attention to detail as a skill set, it's really, can you be thorough and can you be accurate, right? I come from a divinity background. It's with preaching. They say it's not what you say. You got to know what you're saying. You got to know how you're saying it. And you got to know who you're saying it to. Because if you have one of the three, you're still inevitably going to miss the mark. It may land some, but you're still going to miss the bullseye a little bit. And so attention to detail is not just being meticulous and nitpicky. It's that comprehensive lens of, did I cover everything and was I accurate? I don't nitpick over resumes and cover letters, but I do read them closely because for me, I'm looking to know, were you able to be attentive to the details in a written format? Because sometimes you're going to send an email to a parent, and I'm telling you, if you tell someone the housing rate is lower than it actually is, and then you try to backpedal and tell them they owe you more money, they're going to be really angry. And my counterparts in housing will call me and say, Denaja, you told this parent what? Then I need you to call them back, right? Attention to detail matters. It may feel like you're being picked apart sometimes in the assessment process, but I'm sure we can all name moments where something said in writing came back to haunt us. And you're like, gosh, I didn't mean it like that. Or something that you said in a conversation cannot be taken back. It's the ability to move slow, to be thorough, and to be attentive. Also, emotional intelligence. I know some of these sound like cliche things that have been thrown out, but we're really talking about having proficiency at a deeper level of understanding. And so when I talk about emotional intelligence, it's not just the ability to recognize your emotion. Can you understand the impact? It's not that you felt scared or that you felt frustrated or that someone got under your skin. It's sitting with yourself to understand why. What about that got under my skin? And how did that drive how I chose to respond? I used to laugh at I told my staff, I hope you're not around sometimes. So I give myself the first 60 seconds to be emotive. I read an email, closed my door, grunted, and said a few cuss words. I let it be what it was. And then I took a deep breath. I either went for a walk or I got myself together. And then I processed and responded the way that I needed to respond. It's not that you do things in ignorance of how you were feeling. It's how you cultivate an awareness and then process through what is an appropriate way to manage those emotions so that I can maintain the relationship that I need to have. And then for growth, as you're looking for positions to move further up, how have you helped others do that? Be it your student staff, or grad that you're supervising, an entry-level professional that you're supervising, or whatever level you're looking to move up, right? The expansion is not just how do I manage emotional intelligence for myself, how do I coach and help others develop that skill set? Political acumen. We work for a system, in a system, the system. I always tell my staff, we are the man. Like all of the change that I'm trying to invoke, I recognize that I'm doing that as someone who is also a part of the system that is slow to change or refusing to change altogether. And so political acumen is really, how do you navigate the politics of higher ed? How do you come out as a grad student ready to change the world and say, I've chosen to accept a job at a private PWI in the South? There are certain things that are going to be challenges, right? Couple that with emotional intelligence. I cannot pop off every time someone does something that I know they would do at this institution. How do I know where I'm walking into and figure out how are decisions made? Who are the key stakeholders? What is my level of influence? What do I say? Who do I say it? And how do I say it? So that I can see change, so that I can see growth, so that I can be the advocate that I want to be. You just have to know how to read the landscape of where you are. And that could be as small as your team, your office, your division, your university, your region, the entire field that we're in, right? Everyone is talking about future of the profession. People want change. I'm still here because I know right now our field is moving as fast as they are able to move. That's not me affirming it. That's having a healthy awareness of all of the barriers to change and what people are pushing up against to make that happen. The choice that I have is whether or not I stay and do this work, or I decide that that pace is not fast enough for me. Likewise, on your campuses, when you're thinking about being a change influence, as you move up to supervising and you're thinking about the expectation your staff has of you to be an advocate and a gatekeeper, the ability to communicate to them where your limits are and how you're working with what you do have to advocate becomes a very necessary skill set. So political acumen is high. And then of course, there are some industry specific skill sets that are worth naming, and they come from the Kuhuai competencies. I'm gonna pause here because we've talked a lot about, right, reflecting about your own identity, values, and your why, and starting to think about certain skills that you need to have an awareness of or be honing and working through. Before I move any further, any thoughts, any questions, anything you think I missed that through your job search you have found to be important to think about or that you think we should be thinking about?
I have a few things. I just started my job about 4 weeks ago. So my main thing was, my mind said I attended a HBCU, but I didn't want to work at one. My thing was not all Black students are wanting to go to HBCUs. They want to go to PWIs, and they still need to see someone that looks like them. So I was real honest within my interviews of this is the reason why I'm looking at these type of places, because they still need to see someone that looks like them. Again, it's nothing against anyone who doesn't want to go to a HBCU, but you know, we have those students that are going to do different. And I want to still be that person to help them, you know, in that process that they have someone they can talk to. So letting them know. And of course, when they ask me my questions, I was always asking about diversity, because I can see on your face, how do you respond to that? Like, how open are you in because then that'll let me know really what the environment is like. So that was kind of my big thing. Like I was being honest, and, I let them know, look, I love to work, but I'm going to be myself. So that was just kind of my biggest thing. Like I love to, like I told them, I like to joke, but I get my job done, and that's how I am in my office. Like I'm going to be that person, but I'm young enough. And then again, on this campus, especially now, they all think I'm a student. So, fitting in that kind of way of, building that type of relationship, but I'm have those different conversations, and my conversation may be different than yours, and just being able to accept that.
Absolutely. You're spot on, Demetrius. Affirming diversity of thought, welcoming identity, and a place where belonging is possible. I'm going to show up as I am, and I need to know there's a place for me to experience belonging here. I think you made a good point, choosing to do a work on a certain campus in a certain environment to be there for students. If that is your motivation, for context, it was mine. You also have to know what may be required for you to carve that out for yourself if you find that it's lacking on that campus, or if you've chosen to go to a place where you're not going to find it off campus because it's in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, or Rhode Island, or wherever that institution is. You may feel good because you've been there for students, but make sure that you can still be sustained and have your cup filled if you don't experience and find that for yourself. Sometimes we let the means justify the end, and then eventually we experience burnout, or we don't experience enough belonging in community for us to stay for our students. So I appreciate you sharing that. You were absolutely spot on. Anybody else?
Yeah, I will add quickly something I've learned doing a recent search process. I think culture is so important, and in my personal opinion, in my personal experience, I felt like sometimes when you get to the interview, it's kind of too late to assess the culture, because at that point, both parties are putting their best foot forward to impress the other one. So really, like, if you know there's certain types of institutions you want to work out, building your network, asking people who have worked there, and even giving some caveat of, if somebody worked there 5 years ago, cultures and things do change. Leadership, people, so their experience 5 years ago may not be what the experience is today on that campus or in that unit. So, but trying to build those things in advance, whether it's mentors, again, networking, things of that nature, can help you understand the culture better when there's not as much at stake of somebody relocating for a job, or the institution, again, putting their best foot forward to not have the job process be compromised, because that's also a professional reputation on both ends, how you navigate the job search process and how the institution treats candidates.
Absolutely. I have a small soapbox. I talk to employers about offering an assessment to every candidate who interviews with them. And I always notice the ones who like cringe. I'm like, well, what about your process would have you not want feedback? Right? How we are meeting candidates should leave us in a place that you should be able to say, Darius, it was wonderful meeting with you. I know we were not able to extend an offer to you, but we would love to hear back from you how you experienced our process. It would help us continue to grow in our recruitment and retention efforts.
To add to what you said, and Amber, another thing, like when I was going through higher ed to look for the jobs, I would go to the website of the university and see if they had the D9 Greeks, because that really will let me know what the culture is. Just to see if you're open to it, even though I did accept the position where Greek life isn't, but again, I'm in Vermont. So the Greek life, of course, is really almost none here, but just because of the position and what I felt like I could, one, of course, grow with. I guess I can share my age. I'm 33 and I'm a director of residential life. So, being able to get that, I was like, I can really grow and learn a lot from that. So, that was kind of more my reasoning. And I was like, if the opportunity does come for me to get Greek life here and really introduce it. So I share my fraternity always. I'm always wearing something so I can see if people will have that question. And I do get, a lot of questions from, Caucasians of what is that? I'm like, it's a Greek fraternity. So, I just educate them on that. So I kind of help myself out in that way as well.
that willingness to peer educate. I'm here for it. Leonard, what do you have for us? Uh-oh, we're not able to hear you. Okay, well, feel free to put it in the chat, but if you get your mic going, put your hand back up. We can definitely roll with it. It's all right. The last piece on this particular part, and then we're going to move on for some more conversation, is around, right, how do you talk about your trail of success? And that is what your resume is. It is your trail of success. It is the blazing trail that follows behind you, telling the amazing story of what you've done. And so it should really, really talk about the things that you have designed, implemented, practiced, and assessed. I think when you look at it that way, you can get away from, right, it's just bullet points to just tell what you did, right? What are the milestones? What are the feedback that you got on the work that you did? What was the impact on your campus or in your particular community? Who did you do this work with? Why does it matter? What was the lasting impact on your stakeholders? What did you learn from it? And what would you take into the future? I have asked hiring managers over and over and over, and they would take a shorter resume from someone who's been able to make meaning of their experiences over a 3 or 4 page resume that's just a bullet list of everything someone has done. Because one shows your ability to really critically think about what you've done, what you've learned from it, and what you intend to take with you. The other is just a very flat regurgitation of everything you've done. So when you think about crafting your trail of success, view it from the lens of what are the things that you are proud of and want to brag on that will showcase that mixture of your skill set, your why, your values, and your identity, so that they can start to get an idea of what you've done, how you've done it, and the why you wait, and the why for what you've done. So this area was important when Amber and I talked, right? How do you find the resources and opportunities to help you expand when you're ready to find that next job? And so I'm a huge fan of informational interviews, particularly if you're thinking of taking a break from housing and residence life, or going from a public to private school or vice versa, moving to another state or region. How do you do that research and get that information so that you're not flying blind? You can start with people on your campus. If you know colleagues have come from out of state or have come from another field, or if through collaboration, you've now got a partnership with academic advising and you're thinking about advising, ask a colleague to lunch or to coffee to just talk to them a bit more about their work, what they love about it, what the challenges are, what skills they think are necessary. Like, informational interviews are okay to ask the questions that would help you get your foot in the door. Seem like, do you like what you do? That's a very nice question. I really want to know, what does it take to be successful at this? What are the skills that someone who is shifting into student well-being need to think about? Like, I respond to crisis, I do programming, but if I want to move into well-being, what is it that I really need to know? Well, Denaja, you really need to learn a little bit more about curriculum and design. You need to read a little bit more about public health or health administration, because we really do pull from these areas. Oh, okay. Do you have some resources you would recommend? That's an intentional coffee or lunch conversation with someone if you're really trying to gauge more information about a field. Work with your networks. BPN is a great place to start. Get to know people in this space. Come to the things that they offer. Get into the chat. When we get together at a KU Hawaii, come to the social, whatever your region is. If you're able to attend your regional socials and meet people, do that so that you can put faces to names, get to know people, know more about their experience. And I'm going to say, I make cold calls. There's no shame in my game. If I see a name, I'm like, I saw them on the screen before, and I get ready to go to New York. I'm like, Tiffany, tell me about Buffalo. What do I need to know? Do you have just a minute? She's either going to say yes or no. My self-esteem can recover from either. If she says yes, I'm very grateful. If she says no, okay, well, let me go back down the list. Who else have I seen present? Who else name have I seen pop up that might give me 5 or 10 minutes of their time? Most people do this work because we're invested in relationships. So if you can ask someone with intentionality and let them know what you want with their time, and I see Nari nodding, that's a busy person. And if he's nodding, then I think I might be onto something. Tell people what you want and how you intend to use their time. And if they feel like you're being respectful and intentional, people will find you 20 minutes. Learning opportunities, things like this. hopefully your campus HR is more than just how you get a job. Hopefully they offer some tools and resources to help you cultivate a skill set, because it's in their best benefit to want to develop you as a professional on their campus. And then institutes, right? There's MMI, there's NHTI, there's RELI, depending on your region. I have some tension with institutes because I feel like it's knowledge that everybody needs. And unfortunately, capacity always means that like 1% of our practitioners will get to attend these. But apply and think about how to bring some of the things that are value from those to your campus. I was a RELI faculty member. It was wonderful. I realized my staff needed this experience. They weren't going to get it. I got with my campus partners and I was like, how do we create our own Wake Forest version of RELI? We made it happen. Our staff loved it. So you may not be able to go, but you can bring a little bit of that magic to your campus with the right set of collaboration. And then of course, networking. I consider presenting and going to conferences service to the profession. I don't always consider them professional development. So it's situated under networking for me. It helps you know who you need to know, to be in spaces, to build relationships and move up. But again, if the skills you're trying to build are leadership, critical thinking, emotional intelligence, and political acumen, maybe some of that may happen at your conferences. Perfect, Amber. But a lot of that is going to need to happen in a different space. But think about how service to profession can help you with this. And then career coaching. Coaching can fall into all of those areas. So when you were thinking about asking someone to be a coach and they say, okay, it may be in your best interest to think about what is it you are actually wanting someone to help you with. The same person who may be skilled at helping you with salary negotiation may not be the same person who is skilled at helping you with discovery around your skill set. That may just not be their thing. Their thing may be finance. So Amber and I had this conversation around, you can call it a board of directors, you can call it a council, whatever language you want. When you think about this many areas of potentially needing guidance, it's highly unlikely that one person is going to fill all that. So be thinking about how you can connect yourself with multiple people to help you with that. These are the nuts and bolts that most people are looking for, that it's easy to just send you the resources around, and we'll make sure that you get that from the presentation. Your resume or cover letter, again, that's your trail of success. What have you done? How have you done it? And for what purpose? Your cover letter, if it requires one, don't fight with it. There's a way to be friends with the cover letter. The cover letter really is just your opportunity, right? We talked about mindset and skill set. Think of it as bringing your mindset, your skill set, and your trail of success together, right? It's your opportunity to tell them what drives you and motivates you, why you do the work the way you do, and the successful things you've done to showcase that. Short and succinct, an introduction. It's definitely not a regurgitation of your resume. A little bit of advocacy for professional resume writer. I am an advocate of that because again, there's an art and a science to it. And if you've been interviewing, you haven't gotten any bites, that may be an indicator that it's okay to let a professional take a look at your resume and do some things to help you out. You can find someone to do that professionally anywhere from $75 to amounts that are very high. But there's some resources through LinkedIn that can help you think through what that looks like. Very quickly about interviewing, there's two objectives on both sides. For a job seeker, it's to get a job, but it's the second objective that I'm most concerned about that people often overlook. You are also interviewing to determine if your future employer is the best place to help you grow as a practitioner. That's part of your interview process. It's not just to convince them to hire you, it's to be sure that they are the best place for you to continue to grow and develop as a practitioner. And so in doing that, this part, of course you have questions. That's rhetorical. When interviewers ask you, do you have questions? The answer is and should always be absolutely. And I'm glad I see nods. I don't think anything that I've shared today is rocket science. I didn't expect that it would be. It's just a space to have people put it front of mind. There are specific questions to ask about the job. There are questions to ask about training and professional development, about assessment and evaluation. And all of these questions are appropriate to ask. If an employer is uncomfortable with you saying, so what are the most important things that you think I need to accomplish in the first 30, 60, 90 days? That may be a red flag. Because most HR offices are going to want that 90-day appraisal. And sometimes your supervisor's like, oh man, I forgot. It's been 90 days already. Yes, you forgot. I did not. So let me give you my 90-day list of things that I've accomplished to make sure that we're good. But it is okay to ask that in the process. What are the expectations for the first 12 months? What are the goals that I'm going to be assessed on? Our position descriptions are long and they have a lot of things in them. And we know that no day looks the same. But I promise you, the hiring manager, I have in mind what from that position description are very important right now. You can't read my mind. So I recommend that you ask what's on my mind if I haven't told you, so that you have that awareness. Training and professional development. We always say, are there professional development funds? We love going to conferences, but I just told you, I think that's service to the profession. Going to a conference isn't always going to help you build a skill set to help you get to your next position. Ask, what are the professional development opportunities? Do you do professional development planning as a part of our supervision? Am I responsible for coming up with my own professional development plan? How do we talk about growth and cultivation of skill set for moving forward? Couple that with, will there be opportunity for advancement here? There are some schools that are location bound that are very flat in structure, and managers know they're only going to get you for 3 years, because the moment you're ready to move up, there's not going to be an opportunity in that office or on that campus. So how do you plan to work with me as a professional so that when I'm ready to go, I have the skill set and the tools that I need to make the move to the next institution? Organizational questions. My final thought: practice does not make perfect. You can practice a lot. We know this with a sport. We know this with instruments. You can practice a lot and you still will not become the best at it, and perfection is not really attainable. My philosophy is doing your job well and doing your job search well is professional development. Being really, really good at your job is professional development. And that will equip you to be a successful and marketable candidate when you get ready to do your job search. Intentional preparation. It's really thinking about all 3 aspects that we briefly talked about, because I could go on about this. Set goals, right? Engage in some critical reflection at least quarterly or at the end of each semester. Go back and look at what you've done. Reflect on what your experience has been like on your campus, and start to keep a list of things that you would want or don't want in your next position, so that you're really creating a comprehensive approach to looking for your next job. Schedule and plan for how you're going to look for a job. It takes time. My dad used to say, looking for a job is a full-time job. And so how are you going to do that in a way that you are level-headed with it, and able to critically engage when you read position description after position description and they all start to blend and look the same? Understand the difference between familiarity with the concept versus having a deep understanding and knowledge of it, right? We've talked about a lot of skill set. You don't just want to go in and say, I'm a good communicator. You want to be able to unpack what it means to be skilled at verbal and written communication, and how you are able to determine which is appropriate, know your audience, how you engage in effective and meaningful ways. When you talk about supervision, people say, I'm a great one-on-one leader. Supervising is about taking everything you learn in those one-on-ones and then bringing that group of people together and making them a team. We excel at one-on-ones. We can go into a one-on-one and just become the best of buds. And then we go in staff meeting and we're uncomfortable or afraid to deal with tension, with rifts, with differences in thought, with diversity of experience, making space for everyone, right? That base level mutuality and respect. That's the sub B. Getting to know people, and then it's taking what you know about them and bringing them together to make a team. So yes, be familiar with these skill sets and the concepts, but you don't want to go into interviews and just throw things out. You really want to have a comprehensive understanding of what you've done and what you think you can bring to the next position that you're going through. So this slide will come to you. There are plenty of TPE resources, and I want to use this as a plug for TPE. We're always around. You know where to find us. And then the resources that we pulled for the presentation are also on the last slide, which Amber and the chairs will get sent out to you all. I appreciate that you gave me some time to spend with you. Like I said, it's a large topic. We could have gone on longer, but I know we have an hour. So if I can ever answer any questions for you or be of support to you in your search process, please don't hesitate to let me know. That's why I'm here. It's what I love doing, and I would be happy to support you in any way that I can.